Captain Whitaker.
Here's your manifest with 102 souls on board.
Let's get them tucked in. We're ready to push.
I think I found out about Flight a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And Bob Zemeckis and Steve Starkey let me know that they were doing this movie with Denzel Washington, and I was super excited about it. And immediately I started thinking, there's a plane crash in it. Maybe I can use some of the same sound effects that were in Castaway. But it turned out it's a very different kind of plane crash, and couldn't use any of them.
I've made quite a few movies with Randy and Dennis, and I think the thing that's the most crucial for me and the thing that is the most important about our collaboration is certainly they approach sound design as a character in the movie, and they understand that it is such an important part of the cinema experience and that it's there to serve the story, just like the camera is, just like the music is, and just like the performances are. So when I speak to Dennis and Randy about designing the sound for the movie, I basically talk to them like I talk to my actors.
I stay inside the box, and Randy is like outside the box. And I generally interface with the crew and do things that keep the crew moving forward and also keep the crew ready to turn on a dime. Because sometimes Randy just, being outside the box, he comes up with the most incredible non-literal approaches.
One of the big advantages of working with somebody several times is that you have to talk less and less. Since Bob and I have a pretty good idea of the way each other think, I have to ask him fewer questions and he has to give me fewer instructions.
You're watching a film on a flat piece of plastic and you're in a room, you're not in an airplane. So the things that one does to lend more energy or pull the audience in sometimes don't have very much to do with what one would assume is going on in an airplane or any environment for that fact.
We're at 15,000! All right, just relax. Calm down. Get strapped into the jump seat there. I need you to do something for me. We're at 12-9!
Southjet 227 Atlanta, fuel dump is approved.
Thank you.
We certainly have made recordings in airplanes, but you can't crash an airplane to record it. And it's very difficult, obviously, to get in a plane that's in a heavy turbulence for a long period of time to record that. And so we had to fake it essentially, but fake it in a very believable way. And I knew from the beginning that parts of the plane shaking and vibrating were going to be an important part of the sound storytelling, and modulating that so that in a certain moment you just hear a few little parts of the control panel may be shaking, and in other areas the whole plane is shaking, or you hear quite a few things shaking at the same time. And so just the vibration and shaking in the movie is kind of like a little orchestra all its own. And I knew that the engine sounds of the plane obviously were going to be important. We decided early on that the whining elements, the tonal elements in the engine sound that we were using would need to go up in pitch basically through the whole sequence. And that's a problem since this crash sequence is 10 minutes long. There's no way that you can turn up that pitch continuously for 10 minutes, because by the time a minute and a half was over, you'd already have the pitch higher than the range of human hearing. So we used this trick where I did take a jet turbine whine and pitch it up. I think that typically lasts about 30 seconds. And then we used essentially the same thing over and over again, and if you crossfade the two carefully enough, what it sounds like, even if you know what to listen for, it still sounds like there's this continuous rise in pitch rather than you're hearing the same cycle kind of over and over again.
Well, in the crash scene, you'll hear when the plane rolls and goes inverted, Denzel's voice moves up in pitch a little bit. That's because he was literally upside down, strapped into the seat. The cockpit, other than that, didn't do any movement. And what you'll hear in the raw tracks is actually a very, very clean track. And it was easy to mix. And it left Randy a clean palette to create whatever he wanted.
We're at 15,000!
God,
All right,
Rick,
just
what's
relax.
happening?
Calm down. Get strapped into the jump seat there. I need you to do something for me.
We're at 12-9.
On this particular premix, it happens to be the C effects, which you might say the hard effects, very specific, fairly short duration sound effects. There's a cut to the exterior of the plane where you see a part of the plane breaking loose and flying by you under the plane. And so I used a combination of two sounds for that. One is actually a jet flyby, and so you get this piece of metal flying by you, and the sound of it is actually a whole jet flying by for exaggeration purposes. And the other is a modulated wind. That's another set of sounds that I use quite a bit in the movie. I would take a recording of wind that had a kind of tonal characteristic and then pitch change it so that you get kind of a wind Doppler effect. Then there's an impact sound, a fairly exaggerated impact sound for this piece of metal. We're not sure whether it bangs into us, the viewers, or whether it hits some other part of the plane. We found authentic alarm sounds for this kind of plane. And because Bob is a pilot and he wanted everything about this to be as authentic as possible. So these are real airplane alarms. We knew that the shaking and vibrating of the plane was going to be a really important tool for us to modulate during this whole sequence. And it occurred to me that one way to get shaking would be to get a paint shaker, which had a variable control that allowed you to determine how fast the vibrations were. And then we would attach various things to the paint shaker, metal shelves, pieces of plastic to simulate the overhead luggage compartments, etc., and then just try shaking them at various frequencies. We also found a semi-truck that we could get access to, this big, long tractor trailer, and we got in the back of it and brought various things into it that we could physically shake, because that space, that acoustic space, and that structure is pretty similar to what an airplane passenger compartment would be.
We're gonna roll it.
What do you mean, roll it?
Ready? Here we go.
The engines that we hear are jet airplane engines, but they are modulated by me in terms of the pitch, because we needed to use them in a kind of musical way to increase tension during the crash sequence. I'm a big fan of using very low frequencies and bass in films, when I think I can get away with it. And one of the sets of sounds that I used for this sequence is essentially buffeting winds that I put through the tremolator plug-in to get this kind of, once again, vibrating effect. But it's mostly material below 200 hertz or so, lots of very low frequencies, that just gives you a sense that this plane is massive and the whole thing is shaking. In this sequence, the plane has already crashed. Virtually all of the people on the plane survived, and so there are ambulances showing up and people are being brought out of the plane. And when the impact with the ground happened, the Denzel Washington character loses consciousness. And one of the sound elements that we hear there is suddenly this high-pitched tone, essentially, which is like what you hear if there's a fireworks explosion next to you or any loud sound. You hear this high-pitched sound, which is basically your ears shutting down for a while. So we hear that sound, and it occurred to me that it would be interesting if that sound, which is presumably inside the Denzel Washington character's head, became a siren of one of these ambulances or fire trucks that are showing up.
He knows what he wants. He's not at all insecure about what he wants. He's going to go for it. And the thing that I love is he's very focused. The person in a scene, and this is a generalization, that maybe 3 rows back in a crowd, you're never going to hear the Foley for that person. Unless it's really story-based. Anything that's out of the focus of what the moviegoer should be looking at. So he uses a searchlight, a magnifying glass, to look into the story and engage the audience in a way that's really, really his focus.
I love sound as much as I love any other aspect of film. It's funny when people ask me, did you have to do a lot of rewriting on the screenplay? And my answer is always, hey, I'm doing the final rewrite on the dubbing stage. You know, on the mixing stage, we're still writing. And that's how I approach it, and that's how I feel about it, is that just those final things that we're doing to finesse the soundtrack of the movie, I approach it as if it's doing the final rewrite on the script.
Here we go. I've got control. Oh, Lord! All right, Evans, flaps. Flat! Speed brakes.
Speed brake!